Hello, I'm Dr. Klodt, and here is your guide to develop effective thesis statements for your written work in my courses this semester. The goal of academic writing is to develop your analytical thinking skills. Analytical thinking refers to the synthesis of left brain activity, that is, logic, and right brain activity, that is, creativity, to reveal the profound meanings that a text communicates to the reader. In academic writing, a text is not only the written word, novels, drama, poetry, essay, journalism, theory, nonfiction, but also film, television, music, photography, painting, sculpture, performance, as well as video games, architecture, advertising, comics, sports, and countless facets of society and culture. In other words, we can read human activity as a text, to which we apply analytical thinking, in order to reveal a message that is deeper than its surface narrative. You can visualize what we mean by analytical thinking in Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills. This upside-down pyramid is divided into lower-order thinking skills, or passive learning, and higher-order thinking skills, or active learning. At the bottom of the pyramid, your essay would demonstrate knowledge, recalling information from the text, and comprehension, explaining ideas and concepts. For example, stating details, recognizing plot points, summarizing the narrative, or identifying character traits. At the top of the pyramid, your writing becomes much more nuanced. Here, your essay would demonstrate application, using concepts in new ways, creation, formulating an original point of view, evaluation, critically examining and making judgments, and analysis, comparing and contrasting ideas. For example, constructing an effective thesis, making connections between themes, assessing theories, justifying arguments with detailed examples, explaining the significance of your arguments, synthesizing ideas, explaining why, and ultimately interpreting the deeper meanings of the text. The goal of academic writing is to elevate your thoughts into the higher-order thinking skills. With this goal of higher-order thinking skills in mind, what does a thesis statement accomplish? A thesis statement establishes the goal your writing will achieve in your essay, proves a specific argument to your reader, anticipates your reader's questions regarding your interpretation, such as how and why, and forecasts your interpretation to the reader in order to guide them toward your interpretation of the text. To develop an effective thesis statement, it is important to clarify the difference between a theme and a thesis. A theme is a topic, that is, what you will write about in your essay, whereas a thesis is a goal, that is, what you will accomplish in your essay. It is the interpretation you will show your reader. Your high school teachers may have taught you a formulaic kind of writing, namely the three-idea introduction. The first paragraph contains a sentence or two of general introduction, and then you list three ideas that you will write about. Idea 1, Idea 2, Idea 3. And there's a thesis statement, right? Wrong! No, 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 no. The three-idea introduction is not a thesis. The three-idea introduction establishes themes, or the topics you will write about. But it is not a thesis, or the interpretation you will show your reader. I'm sure that your high school teachers meant well. This fill-in-the-blanks style of writing is convenient and is easy to grade for overworked and underpaid high school teachers. But you are in a university now, where we require more insightful interpretations. The three-idea introduction does not reliably produce deep, analytical writing. An extension of the three-idea introduction is the 5-paragraph essay. The first paragraph is the three-idea introduction. Each of the three ideas gets its own paragraph: idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, and the 5th paragraph summarizes the body paragraphs. The formulaic structure of the 5-paragraph essay does not reliably produce deep, analytical writing. Or, as Truman Capote once famously said, "That's not writing, that's typing." If a teacher has drilled into your head this three-idea introduction or the superficial 5-paragraph essay, merely listing topics instead of establishing a goal for your writing, you may experience a challenging transition in my course as you move up from high school level writing to university level writing, and as you move up from lower order thinking skills and passive learning to higher order thinking skills and active learning. A thesis is a specific interpretation you will prove to your reader. A thesis transcends obvious and common knowledge. For example, Julio Cortázar's short story, The Night Face Up, shows how human sacrifice is wrong. Pretty obvious, right? You don't need to write an essay to come to that conclusion. You write about a theme, for example, a topic like reality versus fantasy. But you prove a thesis, for example, a goal. Analyzing the role of fantasy, Julio Cortázar's The Night Face Up exposes our impulse to avoid difficulties, which stymies our resilience to life's problems. Aha! There's a thesis. The analytical essay comes full circle, connecting the interpretation, in the conclusion, back to the thesis, in the introduction. So, how do you start? Here are some strategies. Free writing. Write non-stop for 10 minutes. Whatever comes to mind, write it. No filters, no editing. No matter what, don't lift your fingers from the keyboard. Just keep writing for 10 minutes. Even if you are merely writing the words blah blah blah, while you are thinking, keep writing for 10 minutes. Incidentally, free writing can be effective in overcoming writer's block. Then, after 10 minutes, use the best ideas to craft a cogent thesis statement. Brainstorming. List everything you think about your topic. There is no need to organize your thoughts. Just let your ideas flow. List your thoughts without filters, no matter how odd or irrelevant your ideas may seem. Then, edit your list. Cut superfluous ideas, add new ideas as they occur to you, and synthesize them into a cogent thesis statement. Mind mapping. Write a topic in the center of the page. Then write related ideas around that center topic. Draw arrows and branches to show the relationship between these ideas and how the topics compare and contrast with each other. Use this mind map to shape a cogent thesis statement. Questioning. What questions would someone have about your thesis? Ask yourself who, what, where, when, how, and why. Then use your answers to these questions to develop a cogent thesis statement. Realize that writing an effective thesis statement is a process. Writing a thesis statement takes time and effort and multiple drafts. If you write a thesis statement quickly and blithely, your essay will inevitably be superficial and will earn a poor grade. In other words, I just wanted an excuse to use the poop emoji in a video. So remember, the goal of academic writing is to develop your analytical thinking skills. And the definition of a thesis is to establish the goal of your writing. A thesis shows what you will accomplish in your essay and forecasts the interpretation to your reader. The elements of your essay are outlined in the essay rubric, which is linked on our course webpage. While the basic elements of academic writing are the same, the thesis, development of ideas, and conclusions and interpretations, there are limitless variations within this general structure. How you construct your arguments and how you arrive at your interpretation will be different for each writer. So don't feel constrained by this general structure. There are thousands of ways to establish a clear and cogent thesis, to develop your arguments with specific examples, and to creatively interpret the text. Let your ideas and your imagination soar. Let's look at a specific example. I'm going to write a thesis, outline, and preliminary interpretation of Julio Cortázar's short story, The Night Face Up, published in 1955. First, I brainstormed a list of themes that this short story suggests. As you can see, there are dozens of options. I decided to analyze reality versus fantasy. Remember this previous slide? It took me hours to brainstorm ideas, free write to let my ideas percolate, and edit and rewrite multiple drafts to arrive at this finished thesis statement. Engaging higher order thinking skills in your writing is not automatic. It takes time, effort, and multiple edits. Here is my example thesis. Julio Cortázar's The Night Face Up questions humanity's relationship with reality. The story critiques our impulse to seek refuge in fantasy in order to avoid difficulties. Escapism is comforting, but overindulging in fantasies erodes our resilience to life's inevitable hardships. Notice how this thesis clearly establishes the goal. It does not merely list the topics this essay will explore, although of course fantasy, reality, and escapism are clearly referenced. Rather, it establishes a deeply thought thesis. Overindulging in fantasies erodes our resilience to life's inevitable hardships that forecasts for the reader the interpretation that they can expect at the conclusion of the essay. Writing tip. If you have difficulty starting your thesis, you can write, "In this essay, I am going to show the reader that..." This phrase is prosaic and sophomoric, of course, and is too informal for an academic essay, but it can be useful to jumpstart your writing. Then, before you submit the final draft, simply cut the phrase, "In this essay, I am going to show the reader that," to streamline your writing. To arrive at an effective thesis statement, I find it useful to develop my thesis, outline, and interpretation simultaneously. From my brainstorming and free writing, I needed to develop key themes in my outline to build up to an insightful interpretation. First, the point of view. The narrator shares the protagonist's perspective of reality. It is implicitly subjective, as if the narrator were trapped in the protagonist's mind. Here, I will analyze the role of the narrator in the story to establish how difficult it is to see beyond our own self-interests, and how this subjectivity obscures reality. Second, I'll examine the vicissitudes of reality. Here I will develop the symbolism of the hospital and the jungle to build up to my interpretation. For instance, the jungle serves as a metaphor for life. I will use the examples of suffering, violence, and human sacrifice in the story to show how it is logical for the protagonist to avoid danger, conflict, and even death. But when read symbolically, by hiding from adversity, avoiding conflict, and being consumed by fear, the protagonist is trying to flee the inevitable. Note that I am using bullets and arrows to outline my arguments. A common mistake for students new to university writing is to outline into a rigid paragraph structure. For example, in paragraph 1, I will develop these arguments and examples. In paragraph 2, I will develop these next arguments and examples. In paragraph 3, and so on. I would encourage you to be flexible in your outline, since good writers adjust the sentences and paragraphs as their ideas evolve during the writing process. Writing is thinking. So don't let an overly rigid outline thwart the creative and insightful interpretations that will naturally come up in the process of writing. Back to the outline, I will then analyze the hospital as a symbol of security, but it is a dream. In the hospital, the protagonist abandons responsibility for himself, indulges in fantasy and dreams, the infinite lie, as the story calls it, in order to avoid the terror of reality. We seek refuge in dreams, overthinking, and fantasies. Escapism is enticing, but it creates an artificial reality in which we abdicate our responsibilities, avoid living our life, and ultimately lose our identity, as the protagonist loses himself at the end of the story. This development of ideas leads me to the interpretation. The Night Face Up exposes how escapism corrodes identity. Avoiding problems is enticing, but life's difficulties forge the metal of our resilience. Notice how the interpretation uses the culmination of analytical thinking from establishing the thesis through the construction of arguments with specific examples in the outline to engage in higher order thinking in the interpretation. Your essay should make your case to the reader. You do not need to change the reader's mind such that the reader discards their own interpretation in favor of your interpretation, but you do need to make a convincing argument so that an educated reader accepts the logic of your arguments and understands your line of thinking. Finally, here's a quick tip to improve your thesis, outline, and interpretation. In academic essays, some writers make the error of trying to mind read the author. Students may write sentences such as, "The author thinks that escapism corrodes identity," or "Julio Cortázar believes that we are trapped in our own subjectivity," or "Cortázar is trying to show us that security is illusory." These phrases imply that you are able to read the author's mind. They suggest that you know what the author was thinking when they wrote the text, which, of course, you don't. I would suggest that it does not matter what the author thought, nor what the author intended, even what the author meant when writing the text. After the author releases their work out into the world, the text stands on its own. Your interpretation, as long as you establish a cogent thesis, develop your arguments with specific examples, and arrive at an analytical conclusion that deepens the reader's understanding, is just as valid as what the author may or may not have intended. Instead of, "The author thinks that escapism corrodes identity," you could write, "The story implies that escapism corrodes identity." You don't know what the author thinks, but you can interpret what the story says about escapism. Instead of, "Julio Cortázar believes that we are trapped in our own subjectivity," you could write, "The narrator shows how we are trapped in our own subjectivity." You don't know what Cortázar himself believed, but you can show how the narrator's point of view traps the protagonist in a recursive subjectivity. And instead of Cortázar is trying to show us that security is illusory, you could write, the text reveals to us that security is illusory. You don't know what Cortázar himself was trying to show, but you can interpret the text's symbols, like the jungle and the hospital. So remember, writing an effective thesis statement is a process. There are no shortcuts in academic writing. Writing a thesis statement takes time and effort and multiple drafts. But of course, if you invest time and effort, academic writing begins to lose its friction and becomes a more insightful way to write. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please contact me. Good luck.